This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, awesome. So this workshop tonight is being hosted by the Thurston Conservation District. Here in Thurston CD, we've been working with local residents, since 1947. We serve residents of Thurston County who reside upon the indigenous lands of the Nisqually, Chehalis, and Squaxin peoples. We are one of 45 conservation districts in the state of Washington, and there are over 3,000 soil and water conservation districts nationally. If you're joining us from outside of Thurston County or outside of Washington State, which I know some of you are, we would definitely encourage you to connect with your local conservation district. Conservation districts were formed in the 1930s as a local, place, and community-based response to natural resource concerns. Nationally, conservation districts provide incentive-based programs, education, and non-regulatory technical assistance that make it possible and more affordable for private landowners and individual residents to implement conservation on their property or in their home. All of our work is non-regulatory and voluntary. And because conservation districts are locally oriented, we are able to build our programming and offering around the needs of our local community specifically. This is an online workshop in the first of a series, or excuse me, the second in the series. And as you can see, we're using closed captioning, and there's also Spanish translation in the chat if that is helpful for anyone who's attending tonight. So this workshop, like I say, is part of that local response to local needs and is the second in a series. In 2019, we were awarded a grant from the Department of Ecology, and this grant is focused around bringing more awareness to water quality concerns in the Deschutes watershed of Thurston County, and is really aimed at helping residents implement best practices, best management practices, and in particular, help to restore habitat around streams and the Deschutes River, especially in the areas sort of between Tumwater and Rainier in Thurston County. This grant provides Thurston Conservation District with funding to provide technical assistance, implement best management practices with individuals, and create workshops and guidance material around topics like pasture management, manure and mud management, and designing your property to address your goals and concerns, while also protecting our natural resources. So while this grant is really focused on the Deschutes area, Thurston Conservation District does provide technical assistance to all of Thurston County. And if you have questions about improving pastures, creating mud-free areas, setting up an area or a system to manage your manure, or more, please don't hesitate to contact us. And our contact information will be on the final slide this evening, and you're also welcome to let us know in the comments. So holding these workshops online through this grant has definitely added the benefit of allowing us to open this opportunity up to more folks and make this information available beyond our region. It's really awesome to see people from Oregon and outside of Thurston County joining us. It makes it really fun for us. Like I say, this is the second in a series of workshops. I know some of you attended that first one. All of them are being recorded, and you'll be sent a recording after the fact as well. And we'll share more information about some other upcoming workshops and several other resources that kind of build on this knowledge and you might find helpful at the end as well. So there are three of us from Thurston Conservation District on this presentation this evening, and we wanted to take just a moment to introduce ourselves. I'll speak for myself. I really miss meeting people in person and getting to know about your projects and plans when we hold workshops like this. So our hope is that this helps everybody feel a little bit more connected. My name is Nora White, and I work as the Education and Outreach Specialist at the district. I also raise sheep, and manure management is definitely a real issue that we work with, so I always learn something and really enjoy getting to be a part of these workshops for myself personally, and just getting to hear about your goals and ideas is really a highlight for me as well. And I will hand it over to Kiana to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Kiana and I work as the Community Outreach Assistant at the district. I'm really excited that you all could join us this evening. I get to do a lot of fun workshops like this in my position, and I really get to enjoy getting to hear from all different community members. And usually we get to do these workshops in person, but lately it's looked a little different. So we've been doing these kind of online workshops, and they've been super successful. And I think a lot of people have really enjoyed them. And so it's been a really fun new experience. So I'm really looking forward to getting to hear a little more from each of you. And then I'll go ahead and hand it off to Adam.
Hey everyone, my name is Adam Peterson and I'm a natural resource specialist here at Thurston Conservation District. I'll be presenting on manure management today, and I really enjoy talking about a range of topics that relate to natural resources and conservation. At the district, I do all sorts of things. So I work with the voluntary stewardship program and work on irrigation management plans, and I'm excited to, I can teach on a topic that's really relevant to many landowners in our county. Thanks.
So thank you to everyone who introduced themselves at the beginning of this workshop. And if you haven't, feel free to use the chat box and let us know where you're joining us from and what kind of livestock you have or you hope to have in the future. We also have a couple of additional questions to get you started in thinking about how this workshop connects to you, and it'll also help us get to know you a little better. So at this time, if you have access to do so, go ahead and open up the comment box, and we would love for you to share what your biggest current challenge with manure management is, or what your primary reason for joining us this evening. And we'll go ahead and give you just a couple minutes to share there. Awesome. So we have a comment here. Wayne and Kate are interested in pasture and manure management. We have another person who's interested in learning more about rainwater runoff from their manure pile. Lily says, I joined because I have 18 horses and I usually deliver the manure to local farms, but would like to find a more reliable long-term solution. Liz and Rick say mud management within the winter shelter area and setting it up to avoid the mucky mess of protecting and feeding the beef in the wet season. We have another comment from Robin. They live in Shelton, and mud and manure are their biggest issue. Wendy Clark says, I have limited pasture space, so I want to utilize it with best practices. I'm also interested in carbon farming for our whole property. Lynn Prather from Snohomish County is overwhelmed with manure and is looking for information on how to best store it and manage it. Kelsey says, mud is my primary issue, particularly the uphill entrance to our barn. We have another person who says, we raise alpacas. Their poo is great for gardens. They would just like to do a better job of processing it into compost. Allison says they're interested in planning ahead for manure management before bringing their horse home. They have somewhat limited space and they're interested in, or they're limited and want to know best way to store and compost the manure and then apply it to the orchards and permaculture garden, or maybe give it away. Great. So thank you all for sharing, and feel free to keep sharing as the webinar goes on. And so throughout this evening, I'm going to be monitoring our comments for questions and different ideas and thoughts. So if you have anything that comes up, any questions that come up during the presentation, please put them in the comment box. And then at the end, we'll make sure we answer all of those questions. And there'll also be a time period at the end where you can unmute yourself and ask questions or put questions in the comment box. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Adam, and he's going to start sharing some awesome information, which I think will answer a lot of your questions.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. It's great to hear a bit about everyone and kind of what brings you here today. We have such a great diversity of livestock and livestock owners, and manure management is relevant to all livestock owners, both big and small, and for all types of livestock, whether that's cattle, horses, goats, sheep, poultry, or alpacas. Today, I'll be providing you with a basic introduction to manure management, covering 4 main topics. First, we'll talk about the many reasons why manure management is so important. Some of these are likely already familiar to you and may be what brings you here today. There may be extra benefits to manure management that you weren't already familiar with, and learning about these benefits may guide how you choose to manage manure on your property. Next, we'll cover manure storage and handling. Manure needs to be stored and protected from the rain for reasons we'll cover later. There's a range of design elements we'll discuss, ranging from some simple but effective options to some more advanced ones. And then we'll discuss the benefits of composting manure. And finally, how you can put that manure to use on your property as fertilizer. Manure can be a valuable resource, and it's one you can put to work on your property. Managing manure comes with a number of benefits for your livestock's health. For example, certain parasites of livestock can be spread through manure. By collecting manure and composting it, a topic we'll cover later in the presentation, you can help kill parasites in your manure and reduce parasite populations on your property. You can also help control insects on your property by composting manure and killing fly larvae. Raw manure can be a breeding ground for flies and other insects, and composting can help keep those insect populations in check. Finally, you may also control overall odor issues with your manure through composting. Manure management can also help you make the most of your manure and put it to work. Manure is a resource. It's a rich source of nutrients, and if applied properly, it can be used to fertilize your pasture, your garden, and your crops. With manure management, you're increasing the self-sufficiency of your operation and practicing good economics and resource stewardship. Sorry, a bit of a slide lag there, sorry. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, manure contains nutrients, and that makes manure a valuable fertilizer. A key part of managing manure is to make sure those nutrients stay in the manure for later use. The nutrients in manure are easily carried out of manure by water. Manure and rain don't mix well. When water passes through manure, it can pick up nutrients and bacteria from that manure and move them to wherever that water goes. If that water makes its way down into the soil, so will those nutrients, and that could pose a risk to the quality of your well water if you're on a well. This is especially a concern for manure piles during our rainy season. In an uncovered pile, a lot of water can travel through the manure pile and pick up nutrients on the way before eventually making its way into the water table. We'll discuss simple and easily implemented management steps that can help prevent that. If you're near a stream or lake or sloped area, water can sometimes run off horizontally across the ground surface, and both during and after heavy rains. If this water picks up manure as it travels and makes it to local streams, lakes, or wetlands, this can have harmful effects. By shielding your manure from the rains of our long rainy season, you're protecting your manure and its valuable nutrients for your own use, and helping the health of our local streams, lakes, and wetlands. So it's a win-win situation. Properly managing livestock manure also improves overall sanitation and can prevent the spread of certain pathogens that can pose a risk to livestock and humans. So it's good for us and for our livestock's health too. Livestock can create a large amount of manure in a short amount of time, and this can build up quickly. Take the example of just one horse. One horse, about 1,200 pounds in size, can generate on average a cubic foot of manure a day. That's roughly equivalent to 1.5 5-gallon buckets daily. That may not seem like so much, but if you calculate that over the span of a month, that's a cubic yard of horse manure. Over the course of 3 months, that's a little over 3 yards, and over a year, that's nearly 12.5 cubic yards. That's about 6 full-size pickup truck beds full of manure just from one animal. If you have multiple animals, you can begin to see how quickly manure can build up in volume. Certain types of manure management steps, like manure storage and composting, can help keep that in check and even reduce the overall volume of manure that you have to deal with. I'll start by addressing manure storage options. If you have livestock that are confined, for instance, through the rainy season to minimize mud, or during the growing season to maybe let some of your pasture grow, you're likely collecting large quantities of manure. You'll need somewhere to put that. Manure storage helps ensure that manure is covered and protected from the rain. When designing a manure storage setup for your property, there are 3 components to consider. Location of your manure storage, the volume of manure your livestock are generating, and making sure your manure is properly covered and protected from rain. We'll consider each of those in the following slides. Proper location of your manure structure is essential, both for its easy use and for its effectiveness. You want to locate it in a well-drained area that's high, dry, and level, and that doesn't experience any ponding in the winter. Standing water near the base of your pile can pick up nutrients and move them away from the pile. You also want to keep your manure storage away from wells or other sensitive areas like streams, ditches, or wetlands to protect water quality. It's also important that your manure storage is also in an easily accessible location. If you're using your tractor or a wheelbarrow to move manure, you'll want your manure storage in a place that you can easily get to. And finally, it's always good to be a thoughtful neighbor, so consider locating your manure storage a ways away from your property line. The next consideration for your manure storage is volume, or put another way, how much manure your livestock will produce when they're confined and you're collecting their manure. We discussed how quickly manure can build up from just a single horse. We've put together a spreadsheet which helps you calculate the approximate amount of manure that your animals will generate per month. We'll share a link for that resource in the chat. At the bottom of this slide, you can see a screenshot of the calculator. You simply add values in the cells shaded in green, and volumes of manure will automatically be calculated in the yellow cells. We'll go through this step by step to show you how this works. So let's see what happens when we enter some values. First, you'll want to enter the number of livestock that you have. The screenshot here only shows 4 of them to save on screen space, but there's multiple options in the full spreadsheet, including goats, sheep, alpaca, chickens, pigs. If you pull up the spreadsheet and notice an animal you have isn't on there, feel free to send me an email. We might have information on that, and I could add that to the spreadsheet. I tried to add everybody's the livestock everybody mentioned they had, so hopefully I got you covered, but if not, let me know. In our example here, we'll assume that we just have one horse, and so we'll enter 1 in the first column in the first row. You can see the red circle there. The next column already contains a preset weight for each type of animal. If your animal is heavier or lighter than the weight in the column, feel free to adjust that number. Heavier livestock will produce more manure and lighter livestock will produce less manure. Obviously draft horse is going to produce a lot more than a miniature horse, so we really want to adjust for that. So this is just helping adjust for that difference. The default weight for a horse in this was 1,100 pounds, and so in this example we're just going to stick with 1,100. The next column is for the months that manure is collected from your livestock. This refers to how long your animal will be kept in a confined area and their manure collected. For example, this could be in a stall, a heavy use area, a sacrifice area, just really any place where you're collecting manure and your animals aren't being kept on pasture. In this case, we'll assume our horse is confined and that we'll be collecting manure for 6 months of the year. The next and final column we have to fill out, here in green, helps you account for the volume of any bedding that's added. In the case of a horse, that could be wood shavings used in stalls. Bedding could include things such as hay, shavings, wood chips, etc. Since you'll be hauling out some of this bedding along with your livestock's manure, this column helps adjust for the extra volume that bedding contributes. If you're also feeding hay and some of that maybe gets trampled on the floor and is wasted, you can also account for this in that column. So let's say our example horse is being kept in a stall where we're using wood shavings for bedding. We notice that about 1/4 of what we're hauling out in the wheelbarrow is wood shavings. So we'll enter 25% in the bedding column to adjust for that. You'll simply enter the percentage of bedding that is making it into the manure bedding mix, and that will eventually make it into your manure storage. One alternative though is just to measure out how much bedding you're using. If you buy shavings by the bale or the cubic yard, for example, and you know how much you're going through in a month in yards or cubic feet, you already have a volume to work with. So in that case, you can just simply add that volume to the amount of manure that we'll calculate in this calculator, and you're set. Now we can look to the cells in yellow to see how much manure we'll be generating. Including the adjustment for bedding, our estimate is that our horse will produce 7.8 cubic yards of manure across the 6 months. If you know exactly how much bedding you've used, you can always add that volume to the manure only column provided here on the left of 5.9 cubic yards. Keep in mind that this volume is approximate. The design of the structure and how you manage your manure will also influence the final size of your manure storage structure. So there's a lot of other pieces to consider here. However, this estimate can be a great starting point to help you guide you in planning and sizing a manure storage structure. Now that we've covered volume, the final but perhaps one of the most important pieces of manure storage is how to cover it and protect it from precipitation. You want to prevent rain from getting your manure wet and carrying nutrients out of it, something called leaching. That can be accomplished in a few ways. It can be as simple as a tarp weighted down at the end with a board, which you can see in the photo here. Other options include cinder blocks. Just anything heavy that can hold down the edge of a tarp will work. I want to point out too, the manure storage in this photo is a bin system, but even if you have a freestanding manure pile, simply placing a tarp over the pile and weighing down the edges of a tarp can do a lot of good. What works for you will depend on what you have on hand, but thankfully there's some very affordable and simple options that help prevent leaching and runoff from your manure pile and keep the nutrients in the manure where you want them and can use them. It can be really as simple as just shielding it from the rain. In this photo on the slide, you can see some more advanced design elements. This manure storage structure has a permanent roof installed over it. This roof provides a durable shield against winter rains. You can also see that this manure pile is on a concrete pad with concrete sides. Having your manure storage on a concrete pad that has curbs or raised edges on the sides helps contain the material you're putting in it and any liquid that might potentially leak away. If rain does get into your pile, that could potentially drain out of the bottom of the pile, and that liquid contains nutrients. The concrete edges will prevent that liquid from running away from the pile to other areas where it could eventually cause problems wherever it ends up. While this setup is advanced and is in many ways optimal, setups like these can be costly, and don't feel this is necessary for good manure management. A lot of good can be done with some very basic designs. Do what makes sense for you and what you're able to do, and don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I wanted to touch briefly on what a bin system looks like. You've already seen photos of a few of those in the previous slides. So bins are three-sided structures used to store manure. They may or may not have roofs. The one on the left you can see has a roof, and the one on the left on the right does not. Unroofed designs will need some sort of tarp covering to shield them from the rain, so you'll have to supply that. You can have a single bin design, like in the photo on the left, or you can have a multi-bin design, like you see on the right. A multi-bin design has advantages for composting manure, which we'll discuss later. Bins can be built from a number of different materials. You can use wood, concrete blocks such as eco blocks. There's really a range of options available. It's also important that any bin is at least wide enough for a tractor bucket. It's important that you can easily add and remove material as needed. If you're generating just a small amount of manure and are looking for a low resource option, you can always get creative. You can put together a manure storage structure with shipping pallets and cover that with a tarp. Adding chicken wire to the pallets can help further contain the material inside. Alternatively, you can stack up straw bales and make a manure storage bin that way. The straw bales can later be composted once they've broken down over time. One of the goals of manure storage, which we'll discuss here shortly, is to compost your manure. This helps your pile reduce in volume and your manure take a more stable form. In order for composting to occur, it has to be at least 3 feet on all sides or a cubic yard in size. So make sure your manure storage structure and your pile of manure is at least that yard so the composting process can occur. I wanted to show you this great video made by our colleagues up at Snohomish Conservation District. This video covers different manure storage designs, all from the aspect of composting. You'll see some additional composting options, including manure storage designs, including some that involve fans underneath the manure to speed up the composting rate. We'll include a link to this video in the chat, so if you want to watch this later, you can do that as well. So I'll start the video. It runs about 4 minutes. Oh, Nora, could you turn your volume on? I think that might be why there's no volume coming through on the video. You might need to unmute. I'll let you have controls.
Sorry, Adam. Yeah, this is a little technically odd. Can you say again what you'd like me to try?
Sure, I just think you need to, if you unmute your mic and then just play it, then it should come through because it's on your computer right now. Yep.
Right, gotcha. Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry about that, everyone.
Great system for on-farm load management. Another system is an aerated pile, which means that we force air into the compost pile with a fan or a blower in order to speed up the process and make a more uniform product. Another system is a mechanically turned pile. where the pile is turned with a tractor or a loader in order to fluff it up, mix the raw materials, and make nice mixed compost. Any of those systems will work well on a farm. It really depends on how much time you want to spend managing and the resources that you have available. A very simple system can be made with plywood. A plywood bin, an aerated system works well for that. Another system can be treated lumber, a 3-bin system built in place, and as well as eco blocks or poured concrete walls on a concrete slab. All of those systems work very well, and again, it depends on how much you have to spend and the intensity of management.
If you don't have the money for a bin like this, just remember that you can do something like free pallets that you can stack, turn up on end, wire together, create some depth to a pile, and then use a tarp. That'll get you on bare ground, and that'll get you quite a ways of composting. Most of this wood is treated wood. Some people are concerned about treated wood. They might want to use just plain wood, but untreated wood is going to have to be replaced pretty regularly. So this is treated wood. They're 2x6 boards. They're about 4 feet to 5 feet high, and they're 8 feet deep, 8 feet wide. They have big 6x6 beams that go in about 2 or 3 feet into the ground, and they're not going to budge. There's some against the back wall to give it support. And then on the sides, we have these 2x2 trims where the free 2x6 boards will slip into these as we build the pile. The floor is made out of 5/8 minus compacted gravel. Underneath that is some geotextile fabric to keep the gravel from disappearing into the soil. But then there's the gravel, and the ingenious part, I think, is this piece of concrete slab that I'm standing on. It's about 1 foot wide. It comes out about a foot or 2 in front of the bin, and then it doesn't go all the way to the back wall. The purpose of this concrete slip is so that the tractor shovel will hit that and not go down and take up the gravel. Just take up the compost when you're finished. We have 3 bins, and the idea is so that we have 1 bin that's been completely filled and it's had plenty of time to process, and I've been able to leave it alone for quite a while. We have another bin that is been being filled and is now filled, and this is the one I'm now putting a fresh manure into.
The Snohomish Conservation District has cost share funds available for some landowners to help design and install compost bins on the farm. Please contact us if you would like more information about our cost share program, or if you would like a visit from one of our farm planners.
Okay, great. So hopefully that video came through all right. If it was a little too jerky and you didn't quite see it that well, feel free to watch on the link that we'll provide to you. So, yeah, there'll be another video coming along as well, but there'll be links for both of those. So when composting manure, a key component is to, oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong slide, sorry. While you're storing your manure, the goal for it is to compost. Many of you might already have composting piles, but for those who aren't familiar, composting is a controlled form of breaking down organic matter. Things like manure, straw, garden weeds, food waste by assembling it in a pile. The composting process is fueled by oxygen, and that process generates heat, quite a bit of it in fact. If you mix the pile, a process called turning it, the pile will actually heat up because you're adding air to the pile. Think of it kind of like blowing on a fire and it heating up. You're adding oxygen and it burns more quickly. With compost, the more air that you involve in the process, the more quickly it will break down and it will get warmer. Some designs for larger piles actually include fans and pipes for introducing air into the pile. Those are mostly larger designs, and I think we saw one of those in the video that just played. The end product of composting is a crumbly dark substance called compost, and that has it can have a number of benefits when applied to crops and pasture. When composting manure, a key component to consider is the ratio of 2 elements called carbon and nitrogen. All you need to know is that there are two components of anything that you'll compost, and you'll want to have them in the right ratio. You might already have an intuitive sense of things that have more carbon in them. They're generally browner and drier. Think straw, wood chips, paper, cardboard. Substances that have more nitrogen, on the other hand, are generally greener and sometimes smellier. Think garden weeds, lawn clippings, and chicken manure. You want your carbon and nitrogen in balance for the composting process to be effective. In general, you want anywhere as much as 20 to 40 times as much carbon as you do nitrogen. Outside of that ratio, things can go a little wrong. A compost within that ideal range, but with a little bit more nitrogen, will tend to break down a little bit more quickly, while a compost richer in carbon will break down more slowly. So there's kind of variation of compost within that range and how that process goes. Manure tends to be a little bit more balanced, and some types of manure are already within that 20:1 to 40:1 ratio. Because of that, some types of manure can be composted as they are. Horse manure is a good example of this. It's often right in the middle of the range. If you look at this table here on the right, you can see it's 30:1, so that's right in the middle between 20:1 to 40:1. This can vary though based on animal diet, and certainly changes by type of animal, as you can see in this table here on the right. So there's some variation to keep in mind. Some types of manure are a bit more nitrogen rich and are a little off balance for composting straight away. On the right, you can see, layer hen, that's 6:1, swine pig manures 12:1. So it's a high enough in nitrogen that if you applied it as raw manure to crops, it can actually hurt your crops. You might have heard certain types of manure be referred to as being hot, and that it can burn plants. These manures might be too rich in nitrogen to also compost on their own, and will need some brown carbon-rich substances added to them to compost successfully. Thankfully, common bedding materials such as straw and wood shavings are very high in carbon and can add enough carbon to help balance them out. Be careful not to add too much though, because you can push your compost to be a little bit too carbon rich. Certain bedding materials like sawdust and wood pellets can also just take a little bit longer to break down, and so you gotta be careful in their use. For those looking to take a more advanced approach to this, or if you want to compost your manure alongside other organic waste, like maybe you have some garden weeds or yard clippings or food waste, consider checking out WCU Puyallup's compost calculator. It'll do a lot of the math for you and help you determine the balance of nitrogen and compost in your compost pile. We'll add a link to that in the chat, and I'll show you a screenshot of that in the next slide. So here's a screenshot of that calculator just to show you, what it basically looks like. It can be a bit tricky to work with, but it's useful in that you can put in your feedstocks and it will provide you with your carbon to nitrogen ratio, or at least a decent estimate of it. For this mix of 1 part horse manure to 0.8 parts straw, that puts us at a carbon to nitrogen ratio down here. You'll see under mix value of 38. Over here on the right, they list their 20:1 to 40:1 range, and so we're within it. One important note though is while this calculator is useful and you may want to kind of tackle it at this level, it doesn't have to be this complicated to have a good compost pile. You just need to be aware of what nitrogen-rich manures are and how you can balance them out. If your pile smells strongly like ammonia, that's a sign that you have too much nitrogen. Ammonia is actually a nitrogen compound, so you're actually smelling the nitrogen leave your pile because there's so much of it. Consider adding something rich in carbon to a pile like that, like straw or corn stalks, to help balance things out. If your pile fails to heat up, maybe one reason could be you have too much carbon-containing material in it, like wood chips or shavings. More manure might be a good path forward, or just filtering out more bedding from what you're collecting. You might be, getting too much of your bedding as you're collecting your manure. Over time, you'll likely develop a good sense of what a good mix looks like with your animal's manure. And some of you might already be somewhat experienced in this at kind of knowing what's going to be good compost and what might need some extra additions. An important element of composting is the time it takes to finish. It's a long-term process. It can be as quick as 3 to 6 months if you regularly turn or mix the pile and are introducing air to it. Remember, composting needs oxygen, and if it's not mixed, it can take up to 6 to 10 months. This composting time is always counted after you stopped adding new manure to the pile. And then one final note, while we want to keep water away from manure so it doesn't leach away the nutrients and take them where they shouldn't be, you may actually need to add water to your compost pile if you're keeping it really well covered. As it heats up, that can evaporate water and it can dry out, especially in summer. Having a manure storage that has multiple bins, like on the right, has a big advantage of allowing you to stage your compost. You can be filling your first bin, like here on the left, with new material, while the next two bins, the second bin is breaking down material, and then the third you can have finished compost. Since you count your composting time from the last addition of manure, a multiple bin system allows you to start the composting process sooner. In a single bin system that you're continually adding to, you might have to wait until your animal is no longer confined and you're no longer collecting any manure to start counting the timer on your compost. If you do choose a multi-bin design, just consider how much manure you'll be generating and how quickly it will break down based on your management, so you have enough capacity. Do you plan to turn it so it breaks down more quickly and maybe manure will cycle through your bins more rapidly? Or will you be keeping it static and keeping it where it's at? That'll take a little bit longer, and so you might need extra capacity. So just things to think about if you do take this route. It has a lot of advantages, but you just need to keep those management decisions in mind. Many of you are probably interested in building your own system, and there are some basic plans out there that are available. We'll link to a resource from King County that covers a basic bin design made of landscape timbers and treated wood. You can use this for a 1, 2, or 3 bin manure storage structure. You can see a screenshot of that basic design here on the left part of the slide. Again, this is just one design, and there's a number of materials and options you can use to build your manure storage structure out of. So definitely, this is just one option, but hopefully something that will maybe help guide your thoughts. I wanted to show you another video from Snohomish Conservation District, which reviews some of the elements of composting manure that I've covered and kind of shows them in action. This is from the aspect of composting horse manure, but it's really relevant for all types of livestock. It also talks very well about some of the additional elements of composting, such as moisture and temperature management. We'll post a link to this video so you can come back to it, and it's about 7 minutes in length to give you an idea of runtime. So I'll hit play, and it looks like Nora has her audio, so it should.
Hi, my name's Alan Shank, and I'd like to welcome you to my little farm here in Mukilteo on the Puget Sound. I've been interested in farming for a number of years, and I've also wanted horses ever since I was about 5 years old.
My name is Caitlin Price Youngquist, and I'm a farm planner for the Snohomish Conservation District and the compost and manure specialist. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about some of the basics of the compost process. Composting is a great way to turn a waste product on the farm into a very valuable resource.
I don't want people to be intimidated by composting. Composting does happen. If you give it the right materials, it'll do its own thing. Basically, if you just provide the manure, don't put too much wood shavings in there, manage the air and manage a little bit of the water, pretty much the compost is going to happen on its own. And remember, a pile has to be at least 3 feet high or 3 feet wide in order for cooking to start. A horse produces about 30 pounds of manure a day and urinates about 2.5 gallons or about 20 pounds of urine a day. So that's quite a bit. 2 horses, that comes out to almost a ton of manure a month.
Composting is a relatively simple process that's very scalable based on the size of your operation and the needs that you have. So as you're thinking about location where you're going to design and build a compost system on your farm, consider drainage on your property. Make sure that the compost system will not be draining into any streams or ponds. Consider where the fence lines are, where your neighbors are, and consider access, particularly during the winter.
You want to make your chores as easy and as efficient, as time efficient as possible. You don't want to have to put things in a wheelbarrow and then haul it up the hill or down a hill or to the back 40. You want that compost bin relatively close to where your horses are, so that all you have to do is take the fork, pick it up, put it in the pile, and you're done.
Some of the common challenges with composting in this climate particularly is that the pile gets too wet, which means there's not enough oxygen, and the microbes that are aerobic, that require oxygen, cannot breathe, and the process slows down, and there are odor issues generally when the pile is too wet. So one way to keep our piles from getting too wet in the winter is to cover them either with tarps or with a roof. A roof is ideal because it allows airflow still through the pile, but oxygen is essential for composting.
Generally, the least expensive manner is to just take a tarp and put it on top of the pile, and then put things like I put cement blocks or boards or something of weight.
The ideal moisture content of compost should be about the same as a wrung out sponge. So if I take a handful of compost in my hand and I squeeze it, should leave a thin layer of moisture in my hand. I shouldn't find any water dripping out of the compost, and it shouldn't be so dry that it crumbles. This is about ideal here. There are 3 good systems for managing the oxygen in your compost pile. One is a static pile that has air pipes that run underneath that are just open, and that facilitates the chilling effect as the cold air moves from the bottom of the compost up through the top of the compost. Another option is to hook up an electric fan or blower to those pipes and actually force air through the compost system. That's going to give you the fastest, most uniform product. A third option is to use a loader or a tractor to physically mix and move the compost between bins. Measuring your temperature is the best measurement of success in composting. So if your compost is hot, typically over about 110 degrees, then you know that you're doing a good job with the compost system. If it's cold, that tells you that the bacteria and the fungi are not working very well in the compost pile and something needs to be adjusted, or that your compost is already finished. If you're interested in killing the weed seeds and any parasites that may be in the manure, it's important that your compost gets up over 131 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 3 days. And use a compost thermometer that has a 3-foot probe and put that in the core of the pile and really watch pile temperature carefully.
If you're really on top of making sure it's getting just the amount right of water, you're aerating it, stuff like that, compost will probably be ready in about 3 or 4 months. You can pretty much bet that it's going to be fully composted and cured. If that isn't the case, then you just let it set. It might take 6 months. What you'll notice here with the raw materials is that the horse manure is still easily distinguishable. You see grass, hay, horse manure, and shavings, and quite a few insects in this raw material. You'll notice the finished compost is rich and dark, earthy smelling, and it's difficult to distinguish the horse manure or hay or anything else that went into the compost. So once you're finished with the compost, it's you have a really nice, beautiful product that you're going to want to use on your landscaping, in your garden, or on your pasture. Basically, I like to use it on my pasture. A lot of times I have people asking for my compost. The neighbors covet it, and sometimes people say, hey, I'll take some of that from you. Well, I don't want to give it away. I want to put it on my pasture. One of the obstacles to doing it, I think, is equipment. Sometimes people have a tractor, but they don't have manure spreaders. Well, it just so happens that the Conservation District has solved that problem because now we have a manure spreader that's small enough that you can pull it with a lawn tractor. We also have a larger one for larger loads that you can use on your pasture, and it's free. Do not spread compost from November through February when grass is dormant and wet ground is easily compacted. There is no benefit to the grass by spreading compost in the winter, and you will likely be polluting water with nutrients and fecal bacteria. The best time to spread compost is late August to early September, when the dry grass is waking up and the ground is firm, preventing compaction. If you're a larger place where you have more horses and you have too much that you can use, usually you can give it away. The Conservation District actually has something called a manure share list that you can put your name and contact information on, and we'll share it with others who'd be interested in taking your compost. And remember, when life gives you manure,
Make compost.
Go ahead, Adam. I'm muting myself.
Oh, thanks.
Again.
Okay, great. Oh, there we go. I think that. Oh, there we go. Okay, so the next slide. So composting comes with a number of benefits. For instance, composting can reduce the volume of your manure by approximately 50%. Considering the high volumes you're dealing with manure management, this can significantly reduce the material that you have to move. If properly managed, your composting manure can reach high enough temperatures to kill parasites and weed seeds. Weed seeds can pass through the digestive system of many livestock unharmed, and raw livestock manure can spread weed seeds across your pasture. To get those benefits, you'll want temperatures in your compost pile to rise above 140 degrees Fahrenheit. You can help your pile reach these temperatures by starting off with the right balance of carbon to nitrogen and by mixing or turning your pile. Turning your pile again brings oxygen into it, and that'll cause your pile to heat up. Raw manure also can sometimes burn certain plants due to its high nitrogen and salt content, and composting manure can remove that risk. You can use both composted and uncomposted manure to fertilize. It's just a matter of understanding the pros and cons. Composted manure is more stable and releases nutrients more slowly over time. There's no risk to burning plants with the high nitrogen or salt content, and if the compost heated up to high enough temperature, there's reduced risk of pathogens, parasites, and weed seed survival. Raw manure, on the other hand, is richer in nutrients and provides them in a more readily available form, but one that's a little bit more volatile. It can be a good supplier of larger amounts of nutrients like nitrogen early on in the growing season. But there's also a risk that those nutrients could end up elsewhere, such as groundwater or surface water, for instance, if there's rainy weather after you spread it. So careful management is needed. There's also a higher risk of pathogens, parasites, weeds, and again, raw manure can burn certain plants. Again, this doesn't mean raw manure shouldn't be used, just that it needs to be used carefully and with these risks in mind. So now that you've composted your manure or you've stored your raw manure, how can you use it? If you have a pasture, a garden, or crops, composted manure can be a great fertilizer and soil amendment. And as already mentioned, raw manure can make a good source of quickly available nutrients if applied carefully. So first, it's important to consider your crop's needs when applying manure as fertilizer. Look up the nutrient requirements of your crops or pasture. Does it need a slow and steady source of fertility? As mentioned in the last slide, composted manure might be a great option. But does it need nutrients more quickly, maybe earlier on in the growing season when it's putting out a lot of growth? In that case, raw manure might be more suitable if there aren't concerns like pathogens. That would be a concern, particularly with leafy greens. Extension bulletins can be a great resource for understanding the fertilization needs of a particular crop. It's also important to consider how many nutrients your soil already contains. You might have fertility from previous years that's already in the soil, and it's important to consider what's already there so you don't oversupply. Here at Thurston Conservation District, we offer soil tests and also manure tests. And the soil tests come with customized fertilization recommendations specific to your crop. And manure tests can tell you the nutrients in your manure. You can click on, or we'll provide a link to that, or you can visit our website and find our soil testing page for more details on that service. Once you know how much manure you'll need to apply to your pasture or crops, there's the important question of how to apply it. If you're working in your garden or a smaller scale area, you might be able to get by with a wheelbarrow, a shovel, and a rake. For the garden scale, you might need to draw on a tractor bucket to move the amount of compost you'd apply to that. But if you're dealing with a larger area like a field or a pasture, you're gonna need a manure spreader. It'll deal with the bulk quantities of manure that you'll be applying if you're spreading manure on a larger scale. If you don't already have one, it sounds like a few folks already mentioned that they do. Manure spreader can be a great investment if you're planning on regularly applying manure to your fields. We do offer 2 manure spreaders for rental here at the district, and the availability of that depends on the weather. One is 18 cubic foot capacity shown on the right, and the other is 25 cubic feet. We'll provide a link with more information on those rentals, and you can also find those on the Thurston Conservation District equipment rental page. It's important to know how much you're spreading with your manure spreader. That rate is really important. There's different ways to do this, and there's an excellent document called Manure Spreader Calibration put out by the University of Vermont, and it goes into details on 4 different methods you can use. Determining the rate can be as simple as just knowing the volume of your manure spreader. In case of our larger spreader, that's 25 cubic feet, and then knowing how much distance it goes before the manure spreader is empty. Simple, volume divided by area. Or you can actually weigh the amount of manure applied that you captured on a plastic sheet that you took your manure spreader over. It can be really involved, or it can be really simple. So, for those 4 different methods, feel free to look at those and see which one kind of makes sense for what you're willing to do. On the right side of this slide, there's some really handy conversions that help you translate volume into pounds. So that I definitely take a look at that as well. That can be useful outside of manure spreading, the manure spreader. You always want to apply manure outside of bouts of rainy weather. So you want to check the forecast and make sure dry weather is on. You have dry weather, and dry weather's on the way. If applying to a pasture, you also only want to apply the manure when plants are actively growing and at least 4 inches tall or higher. If you apply in the height of summer and your grass is dry and dormant, like it might be right now, you're not going to receive much of a benefit, and you could potentially just lose nitrogen. In winter, especially in the height of our rainy season, there are major risks of nutrient loss to ground or surface water if it's raining. This really great calendar here at the bottom is from a manure management document developed by Nicole Warren here at Thurston Conservation District. I think she's actually listening in, so hey, Nicole. You definitely want to check this out. It's a great resource, and so it includes manure spreading calendar, but other resources as well. So that'll be provided at a link at the end. It may be that you have more manure than you can use, especially if you have a large number of livestock on a smaller amount of land. It is possible to have more livestock than your land can take. They'll generate more manure than your land can take. In that case, you'll need to get rid of some of your manure because you can't put it all to use. You'll want to avoid simply applying more manure to your land, as that can lead to nutrient overload and water quality issues. It may also be that you're not interested in composting your manure and you just rather kind of get rid of it sooner in its raw state. And so you'll want to find a way to export that to folks who want to use it. In either case, there's a range of options that you can consider. Try linking up with nearby farms, gardening clubs, or landscapers who could use regular deliveries of manure. From the intro, it sounds like some folks have already done this, and can be a really great way to kind of keep those nutrients local and help out local folks. Craigslist and local Facebook groups might be additional options. There's also businesses that do accept manure. We'll post a link to a page by Thurston County Public Works of businesses that provide these services. Currently, the only provider in our county is Silver Springs Organic, which is located out in the town of Rainier. For folks who are in other counties, I would encourage you to look at your county waste disposal pages, see if they have any list of resources. I believe there's some for both Pierce and King, and your local conservation districts might have more guidance there. So the services are out there. You need to do a little digging to find them. And I'll turn this over to Nora.
Awesome, thank you, Adam. Let me just turn my page here. So Adam has talked about a lot of really specific information. At the beginning, I talked about how the Conservation District provides this sort of education and non-regulatory technical assistance for all kinds of topics. And we wanted to share a little bit of specific information and resources if you're interested in continuing your education and opportunities to stay inspired, put your knowledge into action, and kind of move forward to the next step. So in particular, I wanted to highlight the Voluntary Stewardship Program, or VSP. And this program is a great example of how conservation districts work with agricultural producers or someone like a horse owner to meet their goals while also considering specific and important natural resources. So VSP came about via legislation in Washington state in 2011 that is aimed at providing an alternative to regulation for the of critical areas where they overlap with agricultural activity. So if you live outside Thurston County, this program is a statewide program that is enacted county by county. Thurston County was among one of the very first counties in the state to begin working on developing a program. And prior to 2011, the main tool for counties to ensure the protection of critical areas on agricultural land was regulation. So as I mentioned, it's where there's an overlap of critical areas and ag activity. And a critical area includes fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas, wetlands or wetland buffers, frequently flooded areas, geologic hazard areas, which might be something like a steep slope, or critical aquifer recharge areas that are used for potable water. And in Thurston County, nearly all of Thurston County can qualify because our soil types that are present qualify as that critical aquifer recharge soils. So the definition of ag activity in this combo includes the production of livestock, food, fuel, fiber, or floral products. And it includes fallow ground that's in rotation, hay production, keeping horses or chickens, gardening, apiaries, Christmas trees, or land that's used for the maintenance of ag equipment. There is no economic or profit threshold in order to qualify as ag activity. So if this is a program that sounds interesting to you and you'd like to learn more, we have a person on our staff who is dedicated to running this program. And the first step is to fill out a checklist of your current practices. You'll then collaborate with our staff to verify the extent and location of critical areas on your property. Staff will work with you to hear about your goals and your concerns, assess what's on your property, and then together we'll come up with the needs that need to be addressed. With our technical staff, you'll develop an action plan for implementing conservation practices and maintaining or improving the long-term viability of your agricultural operation. And then you'll receive a finished copy of something called an individual stewardship plan. This program is really designed to be a launching place for residents to further collaborate and then communicate with our district and the different programs and services we offer. It's a really nice first step in the door. Additionally, a plan in hand can help when you are applying for permits or agricultural, for something like an agricultural building or changes to your property. It helps tell the county that you're aware of the critical areas on your land and that you've been working with us to continue farming in a way that is actually beneficial to those resources instead of detrimental. And it helps our kind of communication between our office and Thurston County, since we are different agencies and entities. So if you're interested in learning more about this program, please feel free to reach out. Our contact information will be on the last slide, and you'll be getting a follow-up email from me as well, and you're welcome to just reply directly to that as well. So we wanted to share a few additional upcoming events that build off of what we talked about tonight and are really complementary to this presentation. I know many of you have already signed up, and so you will already be getting information about some of these upcoming ones. So all of these workshops that are listed here will run online from 5:30 to 7, and they'll also all be recorded and available to listen to afterwards. If you signed up for the Livestock Workshop series, which this is part 2 of, a few of these are not included in that, and we'd love if you wanted to sign up for those additionally, and I'll send the links in the follow-up email. That includes the advanced pasture management and our virtual farm showcase, which will talk about different soil health management practices in, and you'll get to hear from some local farmers, which will be really fun. Those two were not included in that, so I'll make sure you get a link, and if you'd like to attend those, that will be really helpful. Oops, here we go. So like I mentioned, this is the second in a series. We've also been doing other additional workshops at home, or well, we're at home, but you're at home too. Some additional workshops also, and those have all been recorded. So we have a spot on our website where all of those are listed out. We've also been putting together links and kind of like a Google Drive resource folder for each workshop, which there is one for this as well that has continuing resources, publications, tools like the calculator that Adam demonstrated, and you'll get a link to that whole Google Drive, and there's one for every workshop that we've been doing. So ordinarily when we meet in person, we have a bunch of handouts and kind of a packet for everyone, and this is our alternative to that. So check those out for some resources. And I've talked a lot about how we offer technical assistance to residents in Thurston County. And I wanted to specifically mention that if you are a resident or landowner in that middle Deschutes area of the watershed, which is again kind of from Rainier to Tumwater, we have funding available to match your goals and concerns and help work with you on your property through this grant that we're doing right now. But if you live outside of that area, we have other sorts of funding and opportunities to work with you as well. If you live outside of Thurston County, unfortunately, we can't offer that kind of one-on-one technical assistance, but I'm happy to connect you with the person in your area who does do that. So please feel free to email me or give me a call. That's just fine too. And something else I wanted to offer too is that we have a really great monthly newsletter. It just comes once a month. It has information about all of our upcoming workshops. We have fun articles where you get to know our staff and our board supervisors, technical information. We put a lot of other local events and relevant information in there. And it's a really nice way to stay connected and to really learn about the next upcoming things. So if you have any questions about the district, that's a really nice place to start, but also you are more than welcome to reach out to us individually. And I think we will use the rest of our time this evening to answer any questions that you have. And also, like I said, you're welcome to reach out after the fact as well. So at this time, if anybody has questions, I know Kiana has been watching in the chat. She's just now put a bunch of really helpful links in there. And if you have any questions that you want to add, now is a great time, and we'll stick around and answer those. You're also welcome to unmute if you'd like to answer or ask a question vocally as well.
Yeah, while people are putting their questions in the chat or thinking a little bit about what they want to ask, we did have a couple questions come up during the presentation. So I'll go ahead and ask those, and Nora and Adam can be really great resources here to answer them. So Ruth asks, is the manure the nitrogen and wood chips, or is the manure the nitrogen and the wood chips the carbon, or vice versa? So I know Adam talked a little bit about that. So do you have a good answer for that?
Sure, yeah. So I guess kind of the simple way to say it is, yeah, so the manure is going to, is definitely more nitrogen rich in relative terms to the wood chips. And so in kind of the mix, the manure will be bringing the nitrogen that you need, and the wood chips will help balance it out and provide more carbon. The more technical answer is they both have a lot more carbon than they have nitrogen. So manure, like sheep manure, is 16 to 1. Wood chips are 600 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. So they've both got more carbon than they do nitrogen. But we're just trying to get it in the 20 to 1 to 40 to 1 ratio. So yeah, manure definitely has, yeah, is more relatively nitrogen rich, and the wood chips are more carbon.
Great.
Yes, the more technical answer there.
That's a great answer. So we had another question from Kelsey. They asked if you need to be a Thurston County resident to rent the equipment. And I can go ahead and answer that you don't need to be living in Thurston County, but your local conservation district may also have an equipment rental program that you can utilize as well.
What we didn't mention, we do rent out those 2 different sizes of manure spreaders. We also offer a drop spreader and a spin spreader. The spin spreader does require a tractor PTO driven, but the drop spreader, which is really nice for spreading lime or something like that, is a tow behind a gravity driven spreader. And so just like the manure spreaders are, and so that can be a really nice option also. And then we also offer poultry processing equipment, as well as some different hand tools, a backpack broadcaster, and some things like that. So if you have questions about manure spreaders or other equipment rental, happy to answer those, and we can put you in touch with our administrative assistant who runs that program, Leah.
Great. We have another question from Wendy Clark. They said, we currently pasture rotate our chickens with chicken tractors. We move them daily. Is this not a good practice since the manure is directly on the grass? I can't collect and put into them into compost piles.
Yes, so in that case, most people will have, will maybe have a chicken tractor that they move around, or they'll have their animals out on pasture. And so if there isn't like heavy rains coming, that might, and so I would say it might be problematic if you had like a stream and you had your chicken tractor right next to it and there was a bunch of rain coming. There could be some potential for leaching there, but most folks are going to have their poultry in a tractor situation, or they're going to be grazing their livestock, and that manure is just going to go back on the field. And so the goal there is with proper grazing management, and those plants are going to grow right back. They're going to use a lot of that fertility that was just deposited from the livestock from their manure. So I wouldn't worry so much there. That kind of the I guess manure management is more when you have them confined. So if you have them in a coop and you scoop, we're scooping the manure out. That's probably kind of more relevant in terms of collecting manure. If you do have them in kind of a small pen or a smaller area, some folks might want to collect manure if that's feasible, but that's kind of really up to what you want to do. So, but yeah, thanks for the question.
And anecdotally, Wendy, I also keep poultry. We raise turkeys on our pasture, and we do that strategically because it does directly apply nutrients back to our pasture, and they're scratching it up, and actually our feed has live seed in it that is replanting the pasture at the same time. So we do it really strategically as a pasture management tool as well. But it is a great thing to think about, like Adam said, if you are right next to a stream, or if it is raining a lot while your birds are out there, think about where that water is going. But yeah, a lot of the problems arise when you have a concentrated pile of manure, and then that's when that seepage or leakage can start to be a real issue. You can also test the water if you are near a water body and you're concerned that you might be contributing to runoff. Testing that water for fecal coliform or high nitrogen levels can be a really nice way to just know if you are in the right range or not.
Great. So if you have another question, anybody does, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or put it in the chat, and we will stick around here to answer any questions anybody has.
This is Jana Wiley. I do have a question. I bought a small farm and it's out, it's west of the Shanna Park area and west of Indian Summer. And when I tested the water when I moved here, there were nitrates already there. I think the level was 2. And I'm keeping 4 horses on 3.5 acres. Will I be contributing? I've got a 3-bin set up with ecology blocks and a tarp.
Could you say again what your setup is? You said you have a 3-bin system that is covered with a tarp. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, 3 individual tarps because I rotate. And there's a farm down the road, just like a block away. They come and they grab whatever I have that's either partially composted or fully composted. And I use some of my very small garden. But my concern is that our water, when I moved in, already had nitrates level. It was measuring at 2. And I went back and looked historically, just a number of years back, Shanna Park didn't have nitrates. And then Indian Summer and, Spooner Farms, there's a lot of stuff going on just to the east of me. And I don't know if you guys are interacting with the water district and looking at where farms are, because I know I'm on an aquifer recharge zone. We all are. Indian Summer, all the development, Lowe's, everything is all aquifer recharge zone.
Yeah, so I think you're getting at a really good point of kind of why conservation districts exist, which is that water doesn't stay on the boundaries of our property. So that's one of the reasons that we talk about incentivizing and working with people to find good solutions to manage their property, because we have these natural resources that are not bounded by our property lines. And so you're totally right. There may be something from your neighbor or somebody else, or a leak, or, it's hard to say what else is contributing to the water quality on your property unless you know of the specific source or all of your neighbors. So it kind of speaks to that bigger community issue of water quality, and that it is not solely on us, but it's a collective impact. Something to keep in mind as well, especially as we have more and more sort of urban and suburban interface, is that a really common way that there can be excess nutrients in water systems is from over application on people's lawns or in their gardens. And that's a big reason that we also run a soil testing program, so that people are saving money and not over applying fertilizer or nutrients to their soils as well, because that can also really contribute to runoff too. So I don't know of a specific issue in that area that you're describing, but it could just be part of that collective impact. And it also might depend on the time of year too. So it would be interesting to test at a couple different times in the year and see if that is a constant problem, or maybe a bigger issue when there is more rainfall or something like that too. So that's a good question, Jana, and I would love to chat with you more about it if you want to.
Okay, yeah, I guess the question is larger because I moved here and bought property with a nitrate level of 2 already on the well. And I went back historically and looked, and these levels weren't there. They've been getting a little bit worse over the years, and specifically Indian Summer, who's working with them to prevent them from using fertilizers and nitrates. They have huge collection ponds there that, and they're on an aquifer recharge zone. Do you interface with Indian Summer? They were supposed to be having monitoring test wells and things like that. So
You're talking
don't
about
want,
the golf course, correct?
yes, correct. Indian Summer.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just to the west of them.
Yeah, that's not somebody that I think we've worked with. And I don't, like, you know, as you know, most of our work or all of our work is non-regulatory. So yeah, that's a great question. It's a good question to know who is doing their testing, or I don't know.
Well, I understood that when they took a variance to build that golf course on an aquifer recharge zone, there was a lot of concerns. And what I read was that they were going to be bound to a monitoring system, but no one's monitoring them. Shanna Park across the street, Shanna Park is being monitored, and their nitrate system has gone up too, or their nitrate load. I mean, at 5, you have to report to the state. So I'm just 3 ticks away.
Yeah, you're bringing up a really great question that I don't have the answer to right now. So yeah, I would love to chat more though.
Okay, thank you.
So here's just an idea. You said that there's a place that is being monitored. Maybe you can talk with them and see who their monitor is and find out how to get, you know, figure out how to get the other person monitored, or because it doesn't look like, you know, I mean,
it's you can look up on the Olympia community water systems, and Shanna Park is close to me. I saw that Indian Summer, I didn't see them as a community water system. I know I don't think that they're not on city water because they're off the Elm Highway.
yeah, but I mean, that besides the point, you know, if there's a problem then and you're concerned about it, you know, it doesn't sound like these folks are, you know, they're not regulatory, but if you are concerned about it, then figuring out who is the person in the county that you can make a complaint to or an inquiry to would be on the docket.
Okay. Yeah. And final question. If Thurston County Conservation District helps some people, because I know the past person there who's no longer there is able to get like $40-something thousand of Thurston County Conservation District funding. And I don't know, my little farm is 3.5 acres, but I don't have resources to put a concrete pad underneath my manure bins. Would that help the aquifer system here if I did find a way to do that, and tarp with the goal to put a roof over those bins long term? Because I don't know, I mean, I hate to have that. There's like about a foot of gravel there, and that's it. And then the manure goes right on there, and it's just a tarp system. So I know there could be potential leaching.
So covering it with a tarp is a really awesome first step. And like Adam said, don't let, I forget exactly what you said actually, Adam, but don't let like the beautiful final goal get in the way of just making some really good first steps. You also bring up a great question about how we do offer cost share funding, which is something I have mentioned too. And the last workshop in this series, which is going to be at the end of September, is about how that mechanism works. We'll talk about the funding that is available through this Department of Ecology grant specifically, but we'll also talk about that in general, because that is a big part of what the Conservation District does, is help make it financially possible and technically possible for residents to implement good practices on the ground. So that last workshop in September might help answer a lot of those questions. And I think it'll be myself and our conservation program manager, Karen, that will be talking at that. And so that'll be a really awesome opportunity for people that are curious about how to take advantage of those funding mechanisms.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jana.
We're getting pretty close to 7 o'clock here. So we had one more question here, and I wanted to answer that. Jen asked, how or where can you test your water? And I think that you can buy online kits to do that. And I don't know, Nora or Adam, do you have other resources that are good ways to have water tested?
I believe the county. Oh, go ahead, Nora.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, I believe the county offers coliform and nitrate testing. And actually, I just popped up their website. The Environmental Health Division, yeah, provides coliform and nitrate testing. And I've actually seen, I don't know how it is post-COVID, but I know they had bottles available and for you to fill with your water and then bring in for testing. So I would, check with the county if you're outside of Thurston and curious, your own counties might have those resources too. So.
Yeah.
They're also private labs as well.
Thurston County Environmental Health would be the department that you would check out.
Perfect. Thank you guys for that, those resources. One more question here. So how does alpaca poop measure up to chicken poop from a nitrogen perspective?
Great. So I actually was pulling out some figures on this because I actually didn't have that in the table. None of the local publications had an entry for alpaca, but North Carolina State has a figure for it, and it looks like alpaca manure ranges from 15 to 1 to 25 to 1. Whereas like just layer manure, layer hens would be 6 to 1, and broiler litter, which is gonna have other stuff in it, like bedding, is 14 to 1. So it looks like it's definitely more rich than chicken manure would be, but it can range a bit between 15 to 25. So on the higher end, it looks like it might be ready to compost as is, but might need a little bit of some carbon, some straw, some wood shaving, something to balance it out a little bit. And
Awesome.
actually, I'll post a link to that in the chat here if you want to take a look at that for your reference.
Great, that's super helpful. So we're a little past 7, so thank you all so much for joining us this evening. If anyone has any additional questions, we'll hang on here for a few minutes, but we just want to say thank you, and we appreciate you all sharing with us and joining us this evening.
I will be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow, probably, if not tomorrow, Thursday, with a link to this recording. You'll be able to see the chat with all of the links and stuff in that recording as well. And I'll send out information about how to register for upcoming workshops, the recordings of past workshops, the Google Drive with additional resources, and all that follow-up information we said we would send out. So look for that in your email and feel free to reply back if you have any additional questions, or all of our direct emails are on this slide as well. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's a really nice highlight for us working from home to get to do these events and still interact with our community. So thank you so much for joining us.